Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. And thank you for joining us today for our ATARC's Thursday After Lunch webinar series. And we are going to talk about TIC 3.0, the road to zero trust. We're going to hear some great federal IT leaders, and really excited about this, kind of bringing in two concepts together. It's the first time we've done this. And welcome all the attendees. Special thanks to Dean Kiefer and Kim Middleman and the rest of the Trend Micro team. They've always been a good partner of ours since we started working with them, I think last year, maybe the year before that. So anyway, we're going to hear from our panelists today. We're going to have some Q&A. We're going to pop a poll question or two and then answer any questions. And like I said before, we've done a lot of these webinars and talks and working groups on TIC 3.0 and Zero Trust. I think this is the first time we're trying to bring them together. It's kind of like, you know, what they would say in the ads about Reese's peanut butter cup. It's bringing in the peanut butter and the chocolate together. So hopefully we'll have a spirited discussion today, and we look forward to hearing from everybody. So if all my panelists can come on live and make sure that their mics are on, I'll do some quick introductions. Great, we're all popping on, right on time. Fantastic. So we'll do some quick introductions, and then we'll kick things off. But first I'd like to introduce Sean Connolly, who's the TIC program manager over at CISA. How are you doing today, Sean?
Hey, Tom. Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and I saw some of the books changed around a little bit since the last time. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. But you seem to be a history buff. I've noticed that. It's funny during this pandemic what you learn about people.
Yeah, it's a little window into what they're doing, right? Outside IT or something. Sure.
Yep. Thank you for that and for coming. And then we also have Sarah Mosley, strategic architect, U.S. Department of State, who in her prior role was a TIC program manager. So we're lucky to get Sarah today. How are you doing?
Great. You got 2-for-1 deal today, right?
Yep. You look like locked in some kind of sci-fi movie.
Oh yeah. You like my background? Yeah.
Great. And are you working out of the home office today?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Next, we have Trevinia Salzman, who's security architect over at SBA, Small Business Administration. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Good. Have you been back to the office yet?
No.
Yeah.
It'll probably be a minute. Yeah. It'll probably be a while.
Yep. We'll get there at some point, at least part of the time, right? I guess that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. And next up, we have Justin Morgan, Solutions Architect, Office of Enterprise Technology Solutions over at the USGS. And I wish I was where you are, Justin.
Yeah, I use this as inspiration because I've had a couple of beach trips canceled so far this year. So.
Yeah, you don't look quite tan, rested, and ready. And
doing well though, thanks, and happy to be here.
Yeah, and next we have John Hickey, who's actually, I think this is semi-recent, president of August Shell. And John is the president of August Shell. Prior to transitioning in the private sector, John was widely known as a cyber development executive at DISA, where he is responsible for delivering cyber capabilities to support the Department of Defense Information Network. Good afternoon, John.
Hey, afternoon, Tom. Great to be here.
Yeah. And are you out in Colorado, or?
I am out in sunny Colorado right now, just close to the mountains, you know? Yeah. It's a safe place to be for the most part. So
I love it. And last but certainly not least, we have Dean Kiefer, who's a Federal Civilian Territory Manager at Trend Micro. And is that actually the office?
No, it is, but I'm at the home office, but I'm trying to just pretend I'm at the office today.
Yeah, and Dean's office is actually at Reston Town Center, which I've been to, so it's kind of nice there to go grab lunch. Been there many times. Okay, so what are we going to do next? Let's maybe start off with Sean. And we've talked a lot about TIC 3.0. Definitely want to hear what you guys are cooking up for 2021 and what are our next steps. I know inside of ATARC had this successful TIC demonstration center, and I think I've got a meeting on Friday. What's our next steps now? Now that we've kind of demonstrated some of this, we're looking at a zero trust architecture, and it's in all the elements that we're going to put into it. But I'm excited to hear what's going on at CISA and how you all are looking at this problem.
Sure. Yeah. So let me start out, like you mentioned, Tom, with the roadmap. Again, we're all doing this, right? The strategic roadmap. What are we looking for now with the new year? And I think we're all in a rhythm with the telework surge and everything. So the most immediate side from the TIC perspective is when we released that interim telework guidance in April, we specifically wanted to sunset that at the end of this year. So this month we want to release the draft copy, the remote user use case. That remote user use case will build off of what we did with the telework guidance in April. So that's the most immediate thing, and make everyone aware is that use case. And then, like you said, in 2021, there's a number of items we want to tackle. Through the OMB memo, we're still on the hook to release an infrastructure as a service, a SaaS and a PaaS use case, and email as a service. So we're still on the hook to release all those. And then also to what we're here to talk about, Zero Trust. Everyone wants to sort of leap forward to Zero Trust. We've got to look forward to see what we can do to start supporting the Zero Trust architecture also.
Great. Thank you for that. And maybe next we'll go with you, Sarah. I know you've got this mission all over the globe. It's very challenging with people working from home, not just here in the DC and in the US, but around the world, and then all your constituents.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, we've been using a lot of the TIC 3.0 guidance as part of that launching pad to be able to not only gain more flexibility for our user base in terms of how they work and where they work, but also as a bottom-up and a top-down approach to being able to start implementing some of those Zero Trust concepts into actual environments. So we're definitely heavily using the telework guidance as well as the remote office one. Both of those are kind of starting to get us into the notion that, moving away from the physical perimeter and being able to really look at more the visibility from the telemetry perspective. So those are all kind of little steps forward into that Zero Trust notion, but also being able to look at it from a top down, the framework of Zero Trust, because we have the technologies, it's more about how do you put those pieces of the technologies along with the policy, together in order to actually enable the concepts such as, basically starting with no trust. So those are kind of some of the strategies that we're moving forward with, but TIC 3.0 is definitely helping being able to do both kind of more immediate implementations as well as looking at the long-term approach.
Great, thank you for that. And Trifinia, you guys have been always like the old Mikey commercial. You're gonna have to check it out on YouTube or something, but you always take on these federal policies and give it a shot anyway. So where are you all with your, I know you were involved with the CDM pilot, and how are you approaching this, especially with, all the pandemic things that you had to deal with, the PPP, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh yeah. Well, our leadership is very forward thinking, and they're always challenging us to, what can we do better? And Zero Trust and TIC 3.0 are things that we're working on at the SBA. In fact, Sarah and I helped co-lead one of the ATARC Zero Trust working groups, and we're able to kind of look at it from a 30,000 feet perspective. So we're taking a look at all of those principles, and actually that working group is helping us at the SBA be able to, architect something that will be Zero Trust.
Great, thank you for that. And next, Justin, I know you're heavily involved with EIS and different procurement vehicles. How do agencies buy TIC 3.0 and buy Zero Trust? And what are you seeing across government that agencies are wanting?
Yeah, we are hearing from agencies that they're definitely looking into TIC 3.0 type solutions and kind of what does that look like? And that comes back to the tools and services we have to try to I guess, create orderable solutions for them within our contract vehicles. And one of the things we're doing right now is modifying the EIS contract to add a managed security service, a TIC service underneath of there. And the idea there is it's going to heavily lean on the CISA guidance that's been released to date, and basically give a place in the contract for service providers to be creative, to come up with solutions and things that we need to move us forward. And yes, we're still keeping around some of the legacy services. Agencies are still ordering those, still asking for those in their solicitations. But we are seeing a lot of move toward things like software-defined WAN, asking for TIC 3 solutions, at least, if not in the initial step, but the shortly after the transition step is what we're seeing. But I will say in the post-COVID, we're seeing a quicker run to that. You know, not so much a transition as is, and then look for modernization, but looking for modernization now. So we're rapidly talking with agencies and the providers to go ahead and modify our vehicles to accommodate. One very good thing I wanted to add is that, you know, during the initial Q&A phase with the vendors, it was mentioned that, well, hey, some of the CISA guidance isn't quite final yet. Well, the important piece to us, which is the service provider overlay, or the overlay handbook, is now final. And providers should certainly take a look at that. It builds off the interim telework guidance, the template that was offered at the end of that in April. And that is a very good thing to do. We know there's some vendors out there that are doing that, and that can be reused against multiple requirements. And it's very helpful when vendors are constructing TIC 3 solutions. So thanks.
Great. Thank you. And John, we'll go next with you. I know you worked on this very issue when you were over at DISA, and now you have that kind of perspective that you work across DoD and civilian agencies. What are some of your observations? I think you're on there. There you go.
Yeah, so I think the TIC 3.0 initiative kind of, you know, has allowed during this COVID to kind of think in a different way, right? So especially my experience in DoD and supporting DoD, you've seen a drastic change to there is no perimeter, and even mechanisms in place like JRSS. How can we leverage parts of that for where the data is and what's important that we're trying to protect? And then what do you want to offload? Even going back to how mobility works, what do you want to offload and just let ride the internet? But again, I think DHS has done a great job with its partners who kind of look into how can you test. And what I like about it is I'm seeing a lot of paper tests before. You know, there's a lot of marketing and other things that isn't really true, where this environment lets you to look at the actual equipment and test against that equipment and give yourself options. So I think that's key. And I think COVID is definitely in DoD for sure, and even the intelligence community, many of the things we've seen during this pandemic, we've never seen any other time where places were shut down. So I think the need is now, and I think there are some civilian agencies like the IRS that already had to develop this. So how do we look to those as we support them, and what are those key ingredients of what I call an attack surface that has expanded and will be hybrid still for some time to come? Yeah.
You know, DoD is always about, you know, I got to protect the perimeter. How many eons have we been saying that? So it's a little more difficult when you can't even barely define the perimeter. So great. And I think we're going to try to leverage John to try to get some DoD into this conversation, because they have the exact same problems as civilian folks, and I think that we can learn from each. So that'll be an ongoing ATARC effort. And last but certainly not least, we have Dean. And Dean's been very nice since my Pittsburgh Steelers lost yesterday, and he's actually a Cleveland Browns fan. So I've had and they won by a lot, and he hasn't actually rubbed it in yet. So I'm kind of impressed with him.
I did indirectly through Alyssa, though.
She didn't know what you're talking about, probably. Yeah, but it would be great to get some perspectives from you, because you deal with all the agencies, as well as I know you're really good about interfacing with your commercial clients and the commercial offerings that you offer. So great to
Thanks.
hear your perspectives.
Thanks, Tom. And one of the best things that I'm privileged to have is the largest threat intel organization in the world, our Zero Day Initiative, and just to spend time with them. And they've been market leaders for 15 years, but just to hear their perspective on what they're seeing across the globe, you know, not just in the U.S. or in North America, but across the globe as far as the attack vector with this COVID, because the COVID threats across the world. And so, as John said, you know, we've seen this mobility as agencies are transitioning to O365. As there's more, we're seeing more attack vectors coming into the enterprise. And as agencies are going to the cloud, we're seeing different threat vectors in the cloud. There's different zones that the bad guys are trying to get to. So it's been a tough, I mean, it's hard to believe it's almost been a year since we've been in this lockdown, but it hasn't been, from the cyber perspective, it's been a very busy year for us.
Yep. No, thank you for that. And yeah, please ask questions. We'll kind of get to them. We already have one right now that I'll just get to. Has the team, and I don't know if that means the ATARC team or the CISA team, has the team pulled any zero trust use cases and diagrams, specifically restricted access? If so, where can we access them? Finney, do we have anything? What do we have is probably a better question.
Yeah,
and then
cool.
Sean, I don't know if you want to add to that. Go ahead, Finney.
Yeah, as far as zero trust. So right now we're breaking up into subgroups. So right now we're working on the networking piece. So we haven't gotten to identity just yet, but that'll be in January sometime. So if you want to join the group, please let me know.
That's where I was getting at.
Yeah. Hey.
So we will send that out. Let's, Alyssa, make sure that we send information about that out so people know how to get involved. And Sean, did you have anything that maybe we can get any reference points that you can point to, and maybe we'll put some up for you too?
Sure. So we're looking at how we want to engage zero trust. So when we talk about zero trust, especially TIC within CISA, TIC is kind of the bootstrap program, some of the much larger programs inside CISA, including CDM, NCPS. And so we are starting to work together with other teams and recognize, how zero trust could impact the agencies and the security of their environments, but also how that impacts our strategy and our mission, our requirement for situational awareness. So we're just starting that conversation from our side. We don't have anything yet, but it really goes back to what we'll be working for with the agencies on the pods they're doing.
Yeah, and I think what you brought up is a good question. It's really something I want to ask everybody else. How does the federal government address both zero trust security and TIC 3.0? And maybe I'll start off with you, Sarah, if you can answer that, because I don't know for sure. I haven't seen anything consistent across government that I can. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree. I mean, I think that there's synergies there between TIC 3.0 and ZTA, and of course the work that we're doing with ZTA, working with Trefania, is lending to that, but there's the difference is basically TIC is the mandate. So we have to work through the implementation and make sure we meet the mandate, right? In terms of zero trust, it's more an objective for most of us, right? So it's a strategy, it's an objective, it's kind of the panacea. And in some cases, it's become a marketing term, for all intents and purposes. And what we're at least for us at State, and I know we've talked to Trefania about this as well, is we're trying to kind of identify basic requirements that we see as far as what zero trust is. And I know Jerry's been out, Jerry Karen, my boss, has been out quite a bit and kind of evangelizing zero trust. And so we believe that there are some tenant pillars of zero trust. And of course, in this document helps with that. But ultimately, it's really about how do you, again, break it down into pieces where you can then move forward. And I think this is where TIC 3.0 has been very helpful, is we've got some examples right now of implementation that have some of the characteristics of zero trust. Now, we need to move closer to the data. So our focus is going to be, how do we get closer to data and start now breaking down specific data requirements that we can now adjust our architecture to meet those zero trust mandates, because we can't do it all, at the same time. It's just not going to happen, right? So I think that's kind of where our approach is what is our most critical data? Let's identify the most sensitive and start with those applications that are related to that data, and then move towards, the rest of the environment.
Yep. And Finia, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, my recommendation would be to look at your current environment. That's kind of what Sarah and I have done, talking back and forth about what to do. Look at your current environment and see where you're doing zero trust now. And then from there, like she was saying, break it up into pieces. Look at your identity piece, your data piece, your network piece, your asset piece. And then finally, your policy and governance. And then TIC 3.0 really helps with that network piece. It really brings clarity as to what telemetry requirements you need for that visibility that can also help with that zero trust.
Yep. And John, maybe you can add some points. I know you're in constant contact with the Department of Defense, but even civilian agencies, what you've seen.
Yeah, I do agree. Zero trust is kind of a buzzword, much like cloud was. So you can't get fixated on that, but I think it goes to what are those areas, and especially in this case when you talk TIC 3.0, what are those areas as a service that you can help the majority of the users on? Because I think everything's going to look a little different, but those tenets are the same, right? There's definitely the identity piece that was described. How do you leverage your current investments in that space, but how do you also enable some of the pieces in the cloud that might not be as enabled as say PKI, as an example, with some of the pieces. And again, that's the same in many of the civilian organizations as well as DHS. So I think you have to break it down and look at what you're doing today and what you can do tomorrow. And again, as I say, I had many tools when I was in the department. Most of us would agree, probably too many. So you have to make some hard decisions on what is the effectiveness of those tools with the different capabilities. And I would lastly say things like containerization, other things are great in the cloud, but the security of all of that is still lagging behind. But the push to leverage those technologies is greater today than it's ever been. So I think you've got to think through that, and you have to have a plan, right? So.
Well, we have we can address that a little bit. We have another webinar tomorrow on DevSecOps, so we can address that there. Sorry, I didn't. Go ahead, Dean. Yeah.
So John really impressed me with his. JRSS. If we go back and remember the DoD days, where you guys really came together with a cybersecurity stack, John, that was very successful in my opinion. And if you could share, because in a lot of cases that was TIC and that was zero trust, what you guys were doing.
Yeah, and I would say you always get some help from different groups that kind of watch you and say what you're doing in that space. But I can say JRSS was the concept of a security stack that could be leveraged by the services, right? That would allow them to, potentially manage things at base camps and stations a lot better, which is not much different than many of the agencies on the DHS side that have to manage a CONUS as well as sometimes much larger than CONUS global environment. So I think there are some pieces there, and you have to pick those technologies that are going to help you. In many cases, JRSS, most folks would say it has a lot of different capabilities in it. If a lesson learned from me doing it all over again, I would simplify and pick a group of technologies that give you the same bang without maybe duplicating or having like capability. So shorten the stack, if you will. But I think the concept is you can you can support a whole bunch of customers. In many cases, it's not only the services, it's the agencies that can't really support themselves in much. And that's why you see in the department, the fourth estate initiatives, how can we provide a service? Much like what I think is being done here. So I'll stop talking.
No problem. And Justin, I wish I could see some of these fair opportunities coming in. I'm interested to see how they specify zero trust and TIC 3.0. Is that like one line or two lines? How does it come in? Is it all over the place?
It's all over the place, but more so what I would say is we're seeing a heavy push, and we've been promoting this idea of modernization in three main areas, just trying to get some of this stuff kick-started. Transition your traditional TDM circuits to Ethernet, move from legacy voice to IP voice or UC as a service, and then look to basically get a better idea of your traffic patterns and your inventory, what you have, where you're going, and how that all fits together. Now, when you're going and architecting a new network to, this new modern stack, so to speak, or different traffic pattern, now would be the good time to look at the TIC 3.0 or the Zero Trust or whatever, because you're looking at your environment holistically. So try to lay some of that out in your solicitations and your asks. I mean, we have statement of objectives templates as well. If you don't quite know what you want, we have one for TIC 3.0, and we're willing to share that. We also have it for software-defined WAN and other ones too. And it gives the providers an opportunity to give a different perspective that you may not be thinking versus just directly asking for something legacy or anyway. That we're trying to get out there and promote this idea of ask for better, ask for new, and we're willing to help with that in any way.
Yeah, that having those templates is a non-trivial savings of time. If you're an agency, I know you guys do it for FedRAMP and all these other areas. Please try to take advantage of those. I would hate to have to write a proposal from scratch or
Yes,
an opportunity for scratch. How about we do a poll real quick? Alyssa, can we call up our first poll, and then I'll ask some questions on that. Go ahead, if you can put that up. Okay, this is for everybody out there, and we've got a big crowd today. What phase is your agency in for TIC 3.0? Planning, implementing, or completed? Would you consider Zero Trust a program, a concept, a theory? I'm not sure. So we have an honest crowd out there. If you don't know, don't worry about it. This is all anonymous. So we'll give that about another 10 seconds, maybe 7, 3. I think we got enough. Okay, so everybody, please answer that. See what we have coming in. Planning. We've got an honest crowd out there. I think that's. Does anybody see anything too surprising here? I mean, a concept. I like that. I kind of thought that was maybe not the best way to put it, but boy, people thought it was the best way to put it. A program, a theory. Any surprises there? Or is that what we expected? Maybe Sean?
I'm looking at the Zero Trust one. So I think this goes back to even what Sarah was talking about, where Zero Trust is a journey, a concept. So
yeah,
it's not a tool. It's not a service. It's not a particular product that you can implement, right? Zero Trust is a change in philosophy across the whole organization, not the IT side of it. So certainly I think I can understand the concept as the right answer, or at least the answer I'd choose.
Yeah. And maybe Sarah, where are you guys in your Zero Trust journey, over at State? And I know it's early. It's not like, oh, we completely implemented Zero Trust everywhere. I know that's not the answer. Where are you guys in this journey?
I think, like I mentioned, we're more in terms of there's some tactical things that we've done, but from a actual like planning and looking at the strategic pieces, we're at the early stages. We're not in any way, shape, or form in a phase where I would say, yep, we've got it, we know how, we're going to implement this, holistically. But I can tell you that from a tactical perspective, we're using a lot of the elements. Some of the challenges that we're seeing is integration. Being able to integrate different products and, being able to have it all seamless, especially trying to leverage our heterogeneous environment, right? If you go with kind of one vendor, it's more simplistic, but it doesn't meet all of our possible use cases. So for us, the integration piece is going to be the biggest challenge. And then the other aspect is really looking beyond the network. As a network person, as an IT person, usually you're looking at your networking stack for a lot of those protections, and being able to really bring that awareness to those folks that are providing those types of security services, that it really needs to move up the stack. It needs to be, at the application level, at the user level. You have to understand how the user works. The user workflows are important. These are things that we're identifying as gaps where we need to make sure that there's a good understanding of that, the workflow piece. And because that lends itself now to understanding what the user needs in order to accomplish their job. So you're not preventing them by implementing Zero Trust, you're not preventing them from doing what they need to do. So these are all kind of things that we're starting to map out, and it requires time to do. And that's why I said the best way to really look at, kind of a strategic approach is to do it in phases, and really looking at what are those sensitive data that you do need to protect. What's the highest priority for you? Start there and phase it in. And as you phase it in, I think we're going to see maturity in the market. We're going to see maturity in the solutions, and also in just, having maybe more of a framework for Zero Trust that would have standards and, some integration specifications.
Sarah, I think you've described it actually perfectly. Anytime you get some kind of new technology, we see this in DevOps. It's like all these different tools. How do I get them to all work together and make it work? And it sounds like to me that almost every IT conversation that you have, it's got to be, what's our Zero Trust strategy? Because Zero Trust is far more than the networks, as you kind of put forward there. And Trifinia, I know you want to say something around this, and go ahead.
Yeah, where we are at the SBA, we're just breaking things down, where we have broken it down into 4 phases. The first one being planning, the second one growth, the third one foundational, and then the fourth one is future. So we have it broken down into phases, and we're in that first phase, which is, and we already have some, some parts of Zero Trust already implemented into our infrastructure, as do all agencies, but it's just taking a look at everything from 30,000 feet, seeing how, identity, data, network, asset, how are they all going to intertwine? How are they all going to work in a Zero Trust fashion? So that's where we're at SBA.
Okay, great. Does anybody else want to add anything to that?
Tom, I think both Trifinia and Sarah had great points, because we view it as a multi-layer approach. That's what I'm hearing from everybody on the panel here, that it is a multi-layer approach. It's not a single silver bullet as far as a good response. And that's good to hear that coming from the government also, because that's what we preach. And part of our goal is not only just working, obviously I love people to buy Trend Micro products, but working with technology partners, working with the SIs, but just to have a nice correlation of bringing the best solutions to you. And that's what the goal is here. And it is multi-layer as far as that approach.
Great, thank you. And this question is to Justin. Any stats you can share about how many EIS solicitations are asking for TIC 3.0 or Zero Trust? What is the timing for EIS vendors to have TIC 3.0 capabilities added to their contracts?
So for the stats on Zero Trust or TIC 3, not really capturing that right now. We're going to double back and take a look, because many scope reviews have already occurred, but we're going to go back and take a look at that. But as far as the TIC 3 services being added to EIS, or the service, the as I mentioned, the managed security service, the TIC service under managed security service. We have that in draft and are finalizing that for a final push out to the vendors. We've already sent it out, received comments, implemented comments, updated some things, and are hopeful. We keep saying winter. I'm hoping it's sooner. So we're almost in winter now. But just so you know that yes, it's in the works. We're trying to get it done, and it's going to be under managed security services. And the idea is it's the kind of area that's open for vendors to be creative, is what we like to say. So, but yeah, Tom, did I touch on all the points there?
Yeah, and got a good question here, and I don't attribute anybody. It's kind of our policy, but any plans to integrate TIC 3.0 with CDM? Agencies struggle with operationalizing TIC data with their SCIMs. Meanwhile, CDM offers a single interface for reporting and dashboarding. Integrating TIC with CDM would be a huge benefit. I know you're in the same office with those folks, Sean, and I know that you guys try to harmonize as much as possible. What, for everybody else out there, how do you all work together and interface?
Sure, yeah. So I could, both of the large programs, right, NCPS and CDM, we continually just talk amongst each of the teams just to give an idea of the level of effort between us. John Sims, who does a lot of the work with my team on the TIC side, he was the first program manager for CDM. We have a couple of the CDM engineers that are embedded in the TIC program. Same thing with the NCPS side. We're continually, there's always been this this connection between TIC and Einstein, and there's been this decoupling of the two, but we still, we are closely aligned with each of these. So there's always going to be the desire to push us closer together. I think the way I understand that particular question towards CDM, there's two answers. So in the TIC policy, in OMB's policy, there's this push to eventually have a lot of the TIC capabilities be monitored and automated, and that's the expectation. CDM tools will be able to start monitoring, how a container or a PEP, if you will, can be secured. And I think the expectation is CDM will begin to monitor that. Toward the dashboard, which if I could guess what they're talking about on that one, there's also efforts to align better the dashboard part of CDM with some of the readout, the telemetry, if you will, that's coming from the TIC program. But again, that's a work and effort right now. The TIC side, our major focus right now is on the architecture and getting these use cases out the door. That's what we're on I mentioned the hook for. That's the first thing that we have to really get out there, is have these architectures be, final copies so we can move forward with some of the questions.
Javenia, you guys have done the TIC pilot. You've also done the CDM pilot. Mm-hmm. So how did those efforts work together, if at all?
Yeah, well, in the TIC guidebook, it talks about the telemetry requirements, and it does reference to align the telemetry to CDN and to NCPS. So they do tie together. So TIC 3.0, Zero Trust, CDM, all of these initiatives, they all really correlate to one another. And so at the SBA, we've been fortunate enough to work with DHS for that CDM pilot, and that really helped us move forward for TIC 3.0. It really set us at a good spot to be able to kind of go from there and then move into TIC 3.0.
Yeah, fantastic. And Sarah, I know you can probably add some perspective.
So just a little bit, in terms of some of the capabilities in CDM. Obviously, the kind of asset management is a component of managing your hardware, software, and that's also very important to ZTA. But also in terms of how CDM generates or provides some of the monitoring that is not necessarily network, right? So it's your users, in phase 2, it's your events in phase 3. And then hopefully phase 4, we're gonna have the data piece as well. But bringing those telemetries together helps actually lessen the burden on the network side, and being able to actually now identify where your security needs are, or where you need to actually have more visibility. And so we have, what we believe is that telemetry that, CDM can provide based on the users and based on the events can be correlated, especially for your cloud environments, can be correlated to your network as well. And then, that will bring you more of that awareness of the holistic piece that, what is the user doing? And what, if the user is accessing certain files or certain data that maybe they shouldn't be. And this is, again, going back to the visibility piece of Zero Trust.
Yeah. And Justin, how is CDM related to, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but EIS, does CDM come up, or how do they work together?
Well, we have the requirements in the contract that they have to comply. CDM's actually on a totally different task order under GSA, but there's definitely ties. All the NCPS and CDM and all the other regulatory federal requirements, all that are into the contract, and yeah, they're mentioned by name.
Yep. And Dean, how about if you want to contribute to this?
As far as CDM, I see a very tight correlation to the whole thing because CDM was the first iteration of better hygiene on premise, and a lot of that hygiene is moving to the cloud. So Sarah made the point, and Trifini did also. I keep on referring back to you guys, but on the segmented approach, I agree with that. It is the network, but there are many other components other than the network that are important to the enterprise. And that's translated over to the cloud also, Tom, because that same infrastructure exists in the cloud. And there's a bigger attack vector the government's concerned with because it's the world that's, has access as you deploy to the cloud. And we've learned a lot, through this whole Equinix and this TIC initiative, just seeing what's on it. But that's my perspective on the whole thing. It's a very close correlation between CDM and TIC 3.0 and Zero Trust, and it's good to see this moving in this direction as far as this discussion.
John, you touched a little bit on the challenge of all these different tools and monitoring, and how do you find the right balance to your programs that you had when you were at DISA? You want to add anything more to that?
Yeah, I do believe it's some of those interfaces like Stix, Taxi, Yara, anything that can correlate in a big data platform, and some of those things that you would see from other initiatives like CDM getting after, right? And then providing those, and I think it was discussed here a little bit, some of those attributes at a centralized location that let you make decisions on either devices or identity that are going to drive you in the future. And then I think it's, I think everybody would agree that automation, how do you do an automated response that doesn't require a human, is something that has to happen. It's such a complex environment, so you need the analyst and the others to get after some of the sophisticated attacks, but you got to get rid of some of the noise. So I think both these initiatives do that, right? Look for those companies and those capabilities that support all that integration, because you want to stay away from some of them that might be proprietary. Not to speak to any cloud vendors, but they all like their own little flavor of things, and unfortunately, you're not going to be in one cloud, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the lessons we've learned. The questions are coming in fast and furious, and we definitely have a highly intelligent crowd, I have to say. For those of you implementing, what do you lead with? And I assume Zero Trust, identity, endpoint, redefining network. Zero Trust is very complicated. There's lots of different aspects of people that don't always work together in the same area. So I want to install Zero Trust in my agency. Where do I start? I'm going to put you on the spot, Trifini.
Yeah, great. I would tell you to evaluate what you currently have. Let's look at your data, right? Because Zero Trust moves more towards your data as opposed to your physical perimeter, I guess, in your data center. So let's look at your data. Where's the most sensitive data? Where is your least sensitive data? And then from there, let's tie into, let's look at your identity, who's accessing it. Let's look at how it's being transported. Let's look at network next. And then from there, we're going to look at your asset, you know, your actual device, your computer, your servers. And that's how I would look at it. That's how I would move into installing Zero Trust.
Great. And Sarah, you've talked about it a little bit, but
Yeah. So
elaborate a little more.
I would say I give you a lawyer answer. It depends, right? Because it depends on who's really leading this effort. And for us, I would say we're starting with the network. Surprise, surprise. We're looking at more like the whole microsegmentation, NAC, things like that, where you're starting to segment and draw that trust boundary closer to the data. We see that as kind of that first step, laying the groundwork or the foundation that then, you can like take identity management and your kind of user endpoint device management and be able to integrate it all into now your kind of more defined micro level segments. And that way, then you have essentially a almost like a transition path, because you're laying that foundation. So from our perspective, it's really kind of starting with that network piece and defining your trust zones.
Great. Anybody else want to contribute to that?
Can I jump in there?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, it makes sense that, at the SBA, we would start with data and the State Department would start with networking because of what our agencies do. So to Sarah's point, it depends on your agency and what your mission is and what your initiatives are.
I think that's right. I think that's right. And Sean, you want to add to that?
I think to their points, like there's different components, if you will, the maturity of each one in the organization. Like an agency has a pretty strong identity management solution. Maybe that's not the first step they have to look at. Well, if another organization isn't as strong in identity management, maybe they need to focus on that first. But it's more towards, for me, it's having all these different components ready at the same time to move to Zero Trust. And the one I'm always interested in is going back to that visibility. When you start relying less on the network for some of your telemetry, you start relying more on the access controls and identity management. How does that change your incident responders? There was their playbooks and such. The context of an identity management logs is going to be greatly different than the context of network logs. And so how does this new collection differ? How does that challenge the incident responders in new ways? And also just the resiliency and such. I think it's a whole bunch of questions that need to be answered outside just the different components like we talked about too. Until the agency has a clear understanding of those answers, it may not be ready to move toward a total Zero Trust solution.
Great. Another question came in, and I might actually lead with you, John, on that, because I know you spent a lot of time on it. How does the panel view the correlation of zero-day attacks on mobile devices? Let's broaden it out beyond 0 day. How do we work with our mobile devices, which we use more and more and more and more, and they're truly the perimeter? Maybe we can start off with you, John, on that. I know you did a lot of work in that back in the day.
Goes back to DoD mobility and BYOD, and 2011 was brought up. So we're 9 years in, and I've yet to see a full implementation across the board. I truly, I think they've discussed this. It is about identity. I mean, we created a capability called Purebred to leverage our PKI investment, which went over well at the enterprise level, but then you have to work with all the vendors in that space to make sure you keep that enabled, and some play better than others. So I think in this case, it's kind of opened it up. And I know in the department, there's, now they call it BYOAD, but it's still the same challenge. But I think it does go back to what was discussed here. What data are you going to give them access to? Will that data be able to be stored on that mobile device? How you can control that and at a true enterprise level with their own personal devices. We did it with GFE, as many agencies have done, right? And so I think it goes back to, you have to architect that, and you have to rely on capabilities like MDM and MAS to look at that. And then, you know, the department is struggling right now with what does that mean from, and has always struggled with a spillage or other things as people obviously leverage different email systems at different classifications. Same thing that DHS and others face today. I don't personally, I think you have to plan it and then you have to accept risk. And then as Sean said, the visibility of those assets is key. And I do believe it isn't, it's not just 0 days, right? It's definitely where is that data stored? And I think if you look at the cloud instance, it can help you. You know, we went the container route. We've done a lot of different things in that space. There's vendors in that space still, but if you look at the control of where the data is stored in the cloud and how you enable that access, I think there's capability out there today that would allow you to support that. But it's still a little tricky, and somebody has to accept that risk. So,
yeah, it is, and it's a great 0 day use case. I mean, it's a zero trust use case because you're literally out in the field beyond the perimeter. Sarah, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I know that you guys I think your division handles the phones too.
We don't, but we've got a very close relationship with the folks that do. And the only thing I would add is that, yeah, it is complex, but this is where we're actually seeing a lot of maturity in the market, right? And even with especially with the cloud environments, right? So, you know, if you're using a cloud email provider, you know, there are levels of protections from BYOD to using a GFE, and what your risk tolerance is can be defined to a granular level where, you know, if I'm using my personal phone or my personal laptop, what do I have access to? What can I download? What data can I have, you know, read access versus, you know, being able to actually store? The technologies are there. You can do it. We're doing it, you know. So I feel like there is some maturity there. You do have to, though, plan it, and you do have to understand what your risk tolerance and your risk levels are based on what type of device that, you know, that you're allowing access from. So, but it is definitely a much more mature market than it was even, I would say, you know, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think there's some good movement lately. Vince Sridapan is now a colleague of Sean's. He moved over from DHS Science and Technology over to CISA, and they also have the CUSMO, the Cyber CUSMO, which is going to really take off in 2020. They are part of the CDM program now. Mobility is part of the CDM program. So we've been working on mobility a long time. John knows that. You still can't, not too many places in the federal government, I can do my job, field data collection, storing things storing data on the device. You don't see it too much. And Dean, I'd be remiss if I asked you about mobility, because I know you guys service that space as well.
You know, and Tom, mobility, when I think of it right now and in the landscape we're in, is O365, because there's been so much, you know, a lot of agencies have moved or were in the process of moving. Then when COVID hit, it was even more relevant. But the threat factor, you know, from what I hear from our 0 day guys, it's very high around that mail, you know, phishing attack on those mobile environment, you know, I call 365 a cloud/mobile environment. And, you know, so that's something that's, you know, very relevant right now. And I'd love to hear, you know, the perspective of, you know, Trafini and Sarah and Sean, as far as their, you know, their position on, you know, 365 and how they feel about security around it. Sean,
anybody, you all want to add something? I mean,
yeah, I would love to hear Sean's perspective. You know, has DHS seen the threat vector increase around 365?
I need to stay vendor agnostic here respectfully, so I really can't go too far down that road. But we are working with agencies and pilots in O365, I'll say that much.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I feel like actually there's a lot of maturity. Again, in the past couple of years, there's been a lot of maturity in the visibility aspects and what granular configurations you can have, whether it's O365 or other cloud email vendors. Again, not trying to be trying to be vendor agnostic, but I
Yeah.
do feel like there's been a lot of maturity, and you do get the visibility capabilities are starting to really get much better. In fact, in some cases, better than what you have maybe even on-prem.
Okay. Boy, this we're getting a lot of great questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get them all today, unfortunately. How do you see the guidance of NIST SP 800-27 playing in zero trust implementations within federal? Sean, can I?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay, so two things. I assume he means 207, which is the Zero Trust Architecture Special Pub. And just full disclosure on this is my canned answer. I'm one of the authors of the special pub, but next to Scott, Stu, and Oliver, I'm the Ringo Starr of the group. So they're the real rock stars of that special pub. But luckily, but to be fair, it's a lot of the CISA people are part of that special pub. So we are starting to see a lot of interest toward that special pub being used towards TIC. If you read the Zero Trust Special Pub, you'll see elements of TIC, and Sarah mentioned trust zones a little while ago, how the special publication mentions trust zones and how to use those trust zones. That's a term from the TIC 3 perspective. Ideally, when we start moving toward that TIC Zero Trust use case, we'll start to embed a lot of those special pub components also, obviously the PEP, but also the policy decision point, PDP. And we'll start to embed some of those components from the NIST special pub into the TIC Zero Trust use case also.
Great. We're running out of time here. How would you, if you're going to an agency, and we're dealing with the small agencies, we're trying to do an event with them, and it's so hard for them. They have limited resources, but just even in a big agency, where do you get started? I'm really interested in, zero trust. Where would what would you recommend we get started? Maybe I'll start off with you, Sarah. What was the first thing you did when you walked in there? How about that? You haven't been there that long.
Right, I haven't. So I think they started without me. They started the conversation without me, but I think the conversation it goes back again to the business need. I mean, if you look at what the mandates, like if TIC 2.0, right? I mean, and going into the pandemic and trying to address users' requirements, remote users' requirements, and for us worldwide, right? I mean, staying at home that is not, wasn't limited just to the US, right? So for us, it really came down to actual core business need. We started there. We started with what was immediate and what was tactical. And in some ways that kind of helped us propel into the conversation of, okay, now that we know that there's a way to do this, right? There's a way that, we don't have to look at it as a castle moat. Now, how do we now improve on it? How do we now get actually a strategy around it? Now let's look at some other use cases and some other scenarios. Is our environment able to support it, right? Holistically, right? Because we are doing it tactically, but holistically and strategically, where do we need to be in 2 years and 5 years? So that's kind of where I think the conversation started, is really with the business need.
Yeah, I know you jumped on a moving train when you got over to SBA, Trifinia. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I would recommend reading the Zero Trust publication, reading all of the TIC guidebooks and the overlays, reaching out to vendors, getting plugged into ATARC, talking to the people that have been at your agency for longer than 2 years, and just setting aside like 15 minutes and talking to them. Hey, what did you guys do? Why is it this the way that is? And just reaching out to as many people as possible and plugging in and figuring out what they're doing at other agencies. And then you can kind of figure out, okay, well, we can take bits and pieces from different places.
Great. And Sean?
Yeah, I think both Feeney and Sarah hit the nail on the head. I think, I keep going back to identity and just look at how we're starting to move toward identity.
Yeah.
We've heard before, identity is the perimeter, identity is the new network. That micro-segmentation that we've talked about also, I think those are all key. I think Sarah talked a little bit about this before, the business process is just the inventory of the assets and the data itself. Really, I think we're still, even from the CDM perspective, right? The old phase 1, phase 2 of CDM, the first phase was inventory. And we're still looking at how to better inventory across government. So I think those are all key components moving forward.
Great, great. And Justin, you want to add anything, especially on the resource side?
Yeah, I was definitely going to go with the inventory. Know what you have, where it is,
Yeah.
who's access to it, and for how long, and from what device. And everyone's already kind of touched on that, but that's definitely the starting point for me.
I've been in telecom for a long time. If you don't know what you that's the first thing you got to try to, and nobody knows what their inventory is. That's the second thing. John, you got a little bit of experience in this area, to say the least.
No, I think they hit on it. And alls I would add is, and I would stomp my foot on who's kind of ahead of us and who's leading the charge and what can we learn from them, right? So
Great stuff. And Dean, you're going to close it up for us.
I appreciate everybody's time today. I mean, thank you for, this is a time we talked about this coming together, and I thought did a great job today bringing that message home.
Thanks. Well, it's easy with this panel. Great. Well, thank you all for joining us today. And thank you. That was a fun panel to do. And we've got an event, I believe, tomorrow. DevSecOps Journey. We referred to it a little bit. We got a great panel, went through all these things. As a matter of fact, I got my last prep call, I think, in a couple of minutes. So look forward to everybody joining that, and we'll catch you the next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.